Oh God, what just happened? You'll have to stop talking. We're broadcasting. Oh well, here we go. The equipment is really fighting me today. All right, let me try to get started then. What can we do? What is it that we're supposed to do? What have we done that is so great that our Creator will look us in the eye and say, well done? That's not like God, well done. Some Yehudim, some Jews, believe that they will go to heaven after they die simply because they were born in the lineage of Abraham. Just because they were born a Jew, God's going to look at them and say, well done, good and faithful servant. Of course, most Jews would have no idea what I'm talking about there. It's a New Testament thing. But they think they're going to heaven just because they were born that way. Other Jews, though, other Yehudim, they believe that they will go to heaven after they die, since they're Jewish, but only if they live according to the modern day law. Now, the law is pretty much the oral law, not the Torah, but there are parts of it that are Torah. Parts of the Mishnah actually say, like there's one place that comes to mind, it says, if a man says that he will not leave an inheritance to his son, he has said nothing because it is against the Torah. Now, those parts of the oral law I really like because it's based on the law itself. But there are other parts of the oral law that say that this trumps everything that God laid down in his written law because, life is more important, blah, blah, blah. That's where our organization differs. As long as what you believe in the law that you follow is not in conflict with the Torah, we're okay with that. But when it becomes, when it's in conflict with God's law, like when it tells you to eat chicken rather than lamb on the Pesach, sorry, won't go there. Because there was no temple or temple priest when God gave the command. And don't tell me that God slapped himself on the forehead one day and said, gee, I didn't know Nebuchadnezzar was going to knock the thing down. Gee, I didn't know Vespasian's son was going to knock it down and burn it to the ground. Wow, what a surprise. No, God knew all those things when he gave the order. And he didn't say, well, except when there's no temple and no priest. No, that exception is not given by God. Therefore, we don't accept that exception. That is a violation of the Torah, and a violation of the Torah is what we call sin. All right. Anyway, Christians believe that all they have to do is believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, walked on water, healed the sick, raised the dead, died on a cross, and rose on the third day. Some of the Christians say, well, that's part of it, but you also have to say an 8-second prayer asking for forgiveness. Some think that you have to say it in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, while others believe that you have to say it specifically in the name of Jesus. Some believe that you also have to be baptized in the Trinity, while others say you have to be baptized by Jesus' name. Really? That's all anyone has to do to get God to say, well done. What exactly was it that was done so well? So let's sum this up. Christians believe that God made a covenant with the Yehudim, with the Jews, that required them to follow a law that no man could ever follow. Then God got mad at the Yehudim, at the Jews, for failing to do what they were told, live by the law that they couldn't possibly live by. So then he kicked out the Jews and made a new covenant with the Christians where no one can tell them what to do, not even God, since, his law passed away and they live by grace. And somehow, when Christians stand before God, he's going to say, well done. Wow, don't you think something has to be done well before God would say, well done? Oh, wait, I know what it is. People who don't do what's right are going to hear God say, well done, as in send them to hell until they're well done, right? I'm just saying, All right, so the name of today's message obviously is Well Done. Please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scripture. I believe it's just one today. As most of you know, listen to anything I've ever taught, this is not a law of God. God did not command us to cover our heads when someone reads the scriptures. But we do know, and this is for the Christians out there, because the Jews don't mind this, but let's talk to the Christians here. We know that Yeshua, the guy that the Christians called Jesus, his name was Yeshua. Jesus is a whole different thing that comes along much later when you get an English language and the J and the sound of a J, blah, blah, blah. But we do know that this guy they called Jesus and all of his Talmudim, all of his disciples, all of them covered their head when someone read the scriptures. They covered their head when someone prayed. When they prayed. They called it the prayer closet. When you go into your prayer closet, shut the door. This is the door. Hello. Yeah, that's exactly what they were talking about. Very Jewish. Surprising coming from Jewish rabbis. Just saying. But anyway, they covered their head when someone prayed, when the scriptures were read, and when someone prophesied. They did that. And so if you want to be exactly like Yeshua, if you want to be like Jesus, if you want to do what he and his disciples did, you should consider this. Just saying. But it's not a law. Nobody goes to hell over it. It's not a heaven and hell issue. It's just something that they did by tradition. And we do it for that very same reason. Okay, so our verse today, our scripture is 2 Melachim, that's Kings, 2 Kings, chapter 10, verse 30. It says, Vayomer Yahweh El Yehu Ya'an Asher Hetivota La'asut Hayashar Be'enav Kehol Asher Bi Levavi Asita Lebeit Achar B'nei Re'vi'im Yeshvu Lecha Al Kise Yisrael. All right, so you may be seated. So now we're going to begin with the first word, which was Vayomer, which is literally, and he said. It is to say, the primary signification is to bear forth, hence to bring something to light. And I like to put it this way, it's to shed light on the subject. Good way to say it. So it's to say in oneself, it's to think. You don't have to actually say something, to think something. That didn't come out right. You don't have to say something when you think something. But this Vayomer is also to think to yourself. So when it says, and God said, this is good, and God said, let there be light, he could have just thought it. He didn't actually have to say it. That's what Yomer is connected mostly with the idea of speaking, but it is also from the idea of thinking, supposing, getting thoughts of something. All right, so then the next word is, of course, the proper name of God. And if you've listened to me a while, you know that I say God's name because I have a problem with this whole thinking that God's name, his name, is somehow more holy than his eyes. It's somehow more holy than his nose. It's somehow more holy than his face and beard and hair. More holy than his hands. Somehow more holy than his commandments. No, I'm sorry, I don't buy into that. I think that came from a very strange place, to tell you the truth. They say that it was prevalent in the time of Yeshua. I don't buy into that. I think that it came along about the 300s, the mid-300s CE, which you would call AD if you're a Christian. In that period, that's when people started writing those things, and this really started showing up. So since it's in the New Testament letters, they say, well, see, it goes to the first century, and that's all they base that on. I don't find that in any of the other writings. He said, but what about the Assumption of Moshe, and what about the Maccabees? Well, you don't have anything that predates the mid-300s. Nothing. Everything that we have is from that time period, not before. And so I know for sure it's from that time period. But I think that's when it was put in these texts, and then it was not likely there before that, particularly in the first century, because there's a story, particularly in it's not just in the New Testament letters. You find it in other places, but there are stories of foreign kings and foreign slaves who knew the name of God and spoke it out loud in the first century. How would you know it if no one said it? If everybody's calling him Hashem and calling him Adonai and whatever else all these other idioms that they came up with, that's why you see the Father written in these letters, is because everywhere it had God's name, they put the Father, or they would put the Holy Ghost, or they would put heaven. They were replacing God's name. It had God's name in there a lot more than you realize. And they were just replacing it with this stuff. And we know for sure that it took place in the 350s, but there's not very likely that, to my mind, that it was happening before then. So this is superstition, and it's a weird one. Anyway, if God didn't want us to know his name, he wouldn't have told us what his name was. I'm just saying. So that's followed by L, which is not as in God, but as in to. It's of turning towards somebody. It's a direction. So God said to who? He said to Yehu. Yehu. You probably know him as Jehu, because when the English language came along, they replaced the Y with a J. Why? Because when it first came along, the J made the Y sound, and the Y made the long I, the E sound. As in machine, the E sound comes from the I. It's called the long E, the long I or E. That's the long E sound. Anyway, the Y was what made the E sound, and the J made the Y sound. So when they wrote it and put Jehu, they were pronouncing at that time Yehu. And that's exactly how you pronounce his name, Yehu in Hebrew. So, but over time, then people forget that. The J morphs into the J sound, and he becomes Jehu. And Yesu becomes Jesu, and morphs and slurs to Jesus and that kind of thing. So it was Yehu. So God says to this guy, Ya'an, which is their way of saying because. Asher, because Asher is that, or which. Because Hetivota, and literally that's that well or the well. And it's from the word tov, it's good. Physically as a good, they speak it of a good land. In other words, it's fertile. A good tree has fruit. A good gold, it's been purified. That kind of thing. So it's as of a good, it's to be upright, to be kind, to be a good, to be thought of as someone full of goodness and uprightness and kindness, and it's to be happy even. But they also use this word, and very often use this word in Hebrew, the word tov, for beautiful. Spoken of a woman, of being fair, of being beautiful, and even used for perfection, to be pleasant and agreeable as well, to be prosperous and happy. And prosperous being a very different thing in Hebrew than it is in English. If you have, if you're a woman and you're married and you have children, they called you prosperous. If you were a man and you were married and had children, they called you prosperous. Prosperous in Hebrew has always been connected to children. So if you can't have children, then you should become a rabbi. That way you can have children without being married and physically having children. Just saying. That's followed by la'asut, which is to do, to doing more literally, because it's in plural. So it's to labor, to work about anything. So obviously this is asa, the word. It's to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate, use of a ship. It's used of an altar, of bricks, of garments, because you make things, you do things with bricks and with garments, you sew them and you make clothing, so you're manufacturing something. His use of tents because they're put back in the day they were sewn together and stuff. Well, I guess tents are technically done that way today, but back in the day they did it by hand. So it's used of God to produce, to create, as in the heavens and the earth. He did that. Um, he produced it from himself because there was no matter there. It's like there was this joke I heard once about the scientists finally, they go to God and say, hey, God, we don't need you anymore. And God says, really? How come? Is it because we can create life? And God says, really? Let me see that. And so they go and they tell him as they're getting ready to, they're heading to the lab to see we can create life, we can animate the person, and they'll think and they'll walk and they'll talk and they'll be a full human being. It's no problem. And God says, all right, I want to see this. And so they go there, and first thing they do is scoop them up some dirt. And God says, oh, no. Go get your own dirt. Anyway, so God made this from himself because it didn't exist. And when man can do that, make his own dirt, and then create a human being, yeah, maybe we can talk about it. But until then, I'm sticking with God. So they use this of cattle because they produce milk, right? You heard that. It's to make one fat in the loins instead of a man growing fat because he's producing fat. In like manner, trees are said to make fruit. It's people who acquire something through labor to make a living. To prepare is to make ready. To prepare a victim is to make it ready for an offering. Cut it up, ready it for a barbecue, a sacrifice, as it's called in the Bible. It's to keep a feast because you have all these things you have to do to prepare for the feast. So you get the idea that there's some physical labor involved here. But they also use this to do God's laws. Is to keep his laws. He tells you to do this, so you do it. He tells you not to do that, so you don't do it. All of that is thought of as doing. They use it of right and justice. Why would they do that? Because to live out God's law is to be just. That's why they say that. That's why it's important for us to understand that keeping God's law is called works. It's called deeds, because you have to actually do something if you're going to keep God's law. Because some of his laws are such that you have to keep the feast. You have to do things on the feast at a certain time, right? So there are deeds to be done. You have to help your ox get his neighbor out of the ditch. That's actually what all was going to come out. You have to help your neighbor get his ox out of the ditch sometimes. Anyway, I hope you guys are getting the idea. There's in the New Testament letters, there's a book they call Acts, and that's comes from this very word, ma'asim, asa, ma'asim. You hear asa in there. And in Acts, in the book of deeds, in the book of works, the thing that Christians hate so bad are the works. They have a book of works, and they don't like works. But in the book of works, Acts chapter 10, verse 33, in the King James it says, immediately therefore I sent to thee, and thou hast well done. I don't know if you guys have caught this, but we talked about something being good and fair and all that kind of stuff, and then we talked about doing something. So they just said, well done, right? That's what was just said. And here's an example from the book of works, Acts chapter 10, verse 33. Immediately, therefore, I sent to you, and you have well done. You're starting to get an idea here that you are come. I sent to you, and you came here, so you have well done. What does that sound like to you? It sounds to me like well done is a Hebrew idiom, which means you have obeyed. I sent for you. You have well done in that you are here. Acts 10:33. Immediately, therefore, I sent you, and you have well done that you are here. You are come. You get it? So well done means obey. If God is saying well done, he's saying you have obeyed. Do you get it now? So the next one is hayashar, which is the right, straightness of a way. Figuratively, what is right, what ought to be done, that which is just. Also, that we ought to speak, that which is true and right. Use of persons, uprightness, integrity. It's followed by the Anav, which is in my eyes. You've done what's right in my eyes, God says. And of course, this word actually comes from the idea of flowing, of the tears flowing from your eyes. And from that picture, they come up with the name Ayin, your eyes. Okay, so then it's Kehol. This is all you've done. All Asher, all that Bi Levavi, all that is in my heart. God's telling us that you obeyed everything that was in my heart. That's incredible, isn't it? And it's of course the seat of the affections and the emotions, and it's a little thing that pumps. It's really what we think of as heart as well in our world. We use it the exact same way. Then this is Asita. You hear Asa? Asita, we've already had this word, to do, to labor, to produce something, to live by God's law, to do what he asks of you. And then it says lebate, that's to house, and it's a house, it's a movable house. Why? Because in their day it was a tent. But it was used of a royal house, it was used of a palace, it was used of a fortress, it was used of the house of God, the Hechal, the temple. Anyway, it's a house. But you should know this about Hebrew when they speak of the house, it's a dwelling place and abode, a place where a family lives, loves, and grows. And doesn't that happen in the Hechal? Because we're talking about the spiritual family now, the spiritual growth, right? That's followed by Achav, that's a guy's name. You guys know him as Ahab. You believe that his name is it is Achav, and they changed it to Ahab. Oh well, whatever. And this is B'nai, that's children. It's a son. Sometimes used children of both sexes, though. In fact, it's almost always used of it because it's in plural. Anyway, descendants, some grandkids. It is a name of age for a boy, a youth, is applied to a subject, rendering obedience to a king or a lord. Your children, because they do what you say, so you call them your children. So it's used of teachers, because the students are supposed to do what the teacher says and learn from the teacher and do what the teacher says. Then the teacher calls them his children. It's metaphorically, a son of death is someone who's doomed to die, because they're doing everything that's going to cause them to die, right? Because he's going to be delivered to the dominion of death at some point. A son of stripes, that's from the Bible. They call somebody a son of stripes. Well, that's somebody who's doing something he's not supposed to, so he's doomed for stripes. It's usually used of someone who's adopted. A foster son is called B'nai. Someone who is brought up like a son is called B'nai. Doesn't even have to be related. A disciple is called a child, a son. Inasmuch as teachers were, I've already said this, but inasmuch as teachers were treated with reverence and obedience like parents, they received the title of father. Sons of the prophets were not, you would say that literally of their physical children, but you also said it of their students. Because, see, it wasn't that prophets taught people to prophesy. Prophets were rabbis, and these rabbis taught their Talmudim, their disciples, so they were called the sons of the prophets. The schools of the prophets were not actual schools where people learned to be prophets. I didn't know this was going to say this. It was an idiomatic phrase used of the disciples who followed the prophets. It's of a place. It denotes a man there born or brought up, son of Zion. I was born in California, so I'm a son of California. You get it. You're a son of Israel. If you're from Israel, you're a son of Italy. If you're born there, you get it. You get the idea. It's the children. And this is Rebbeim, and this is fourth, like four with the TH, fourth. This is Yeshvu, which is sit. So it's to sit down, it's to be seated, it's to sit in a place, to sit on a throne, to sit on a bed. Especially to sit is used of judges, where they sit and give judgment. the seat of judgment. Hopefully you see what I'm talking about, of an army which sits down in a place and holds possession of it. So if they have taken over a place, they call it peace. It's to remain, to abide, to dwell in, to inhabit the place. Then it's followed with leha, to you, all, which is on or upon. And then it says, he said. He said, that's throne. It's a seat, a lofty and covered with a canopy or hanging, hence a royal throne. The tribunal of a judge, the seat of the high priest. And then it says, Yisrael. You know, that's Israel, right? So here's my amplified, incomprehensible translation. It's second Malachi, remember, it's 2 Kings 10:30. And Yahweh brought it to light and said to Yehi, because you have labored, worked about, made, produced by labor, manufactured, fabricated, prepared, made ready, obeyed, kept my commandments, did what was right, just, good, upright, kindness, happy, fair, beautiful, pleasant, prosperous, excellent, cheerful, and merry, that which is right, true, and ought to be in my eyes. God saying you did all that was right, true in my eyes, and according to all that is in my heart, to the house of Ahav, and remember, your children, this is the cool part, your children will sit on the throne of Yisrael to the fourth, and idiomatically, to the fourth generation. Just because the man did, because he obeyed, because he well done, because he obeyed, his children sat on the throne of Israel for 4 generations. So here's my translation, my regular translation of 2 Kings. And Yahweh said to Yehi, because you have well done, because you have obeyed, that which is right in my eyes, and according to all that is in my heart, to the house of Ahav, your children will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Man, what do you think he got when he got to heaven, if he got that on earth? Wow. All he had to do was what God asked him to do. Now let's look at something from the Sefer Shelikim. That's the New Testament. And I'm going to look at King James thing. I shouldn't say those things. I know that offends people, and I don't mean to. It's just, I had a teacher that used to call it that all the time, and I still have a habit of doing that. Levine, or Matthew chapter 25:21. This is King James. It says, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. I hope you guys know God didn't talk like this, right? Anyway, here's my translation of the Greek text of Levi, or Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. This is my translation of the Greek text. I did not steal this from anybody. Verse 14, for as a man who was going away called to his own avadim, to his own servants, and gave them his goods. And to one he gave 5 silver coins, to another 2, gave 2 silver coins, and to another 1. So you get, one guy gets 5, the next guy gets 2, the next guy gets 1. Then it says, everyone, listen carefully, according to his own ability, and left immediately. The Lord didn't ask his servants, his avadim, to do something beyond their abilities. He asked them to do something he knew they could handle. This is commentary, by the way, on the Torah. Because at this point in time, the Jews had just begun to say that nobody could fully live out the Torah. They had just begun to teach that we were sinners, saved by grace, and we were never going to win this Tater race. They were just starting to say that man had this evil inclination. This teaching did not exist before this time period. But they had this evil inclination. The man was always going to fall into sin and could never be perfect. And by the way, did you know that the Bible declares about 50 people to be perfect? I bet you thought it was just Jesus. But no, about 50 people. And it also tells everyone who's a child of God to be perfect. Yeah, it does. Multiple times. So they had just begun to teach that kind of thing. Oh, well, nobody can live out the law. So that's why we repent and we ask God to forgive us every moment of every day. Because you never know when you're going to die. Because, see, there's a story. This Talmud, this student, he asked his Rabbi, how often should we repent? And the rabbi says, just before you die. And they said, but Rabbi, we don't know when we will die. The rabbi says, that's the point. In other words, you had to be repenting and asking for forgiveness all the time. Why would this happen? It would happen because the Yehudim, the Jews, in particular the leaders, the Rabbim, had become Hellenized and were now reading the Bible through the eyes of the Greek thought instead of through the eyes of the Hebrew thought. And when it became Greek, it became very literal. And they forgot about their idioms. And they forgot about their idiomatic language and their idiomatic ways. And everything became very literal. And so now all of a sudden, there's just that they've added so much to God's law that it literally was impossible for somebody to live that out. Or so everyone thought, until Yeshua disagreed. So this is commentary on this. He's not asking. God has never asked his people to do something they couldn't do. That's what he just said. And to one he gave 5 silver coins, to another 2, and to another 1. Everyone, according to his own ability. And he left immediately. Verse 16. He who received 5 silver coins went and invested the money, making a profit of another 5. Likewise, he who received 2 gained another 2. But he that received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Adon's money. He hid his Lord's money. And after a long time, the Adon, the Lord of those Avadim, of those servants, came and settled matters with him. And he that received the 5 silver coins brought another 5, saying, what, the first 5? No, he brought all 10. Saying, Lord, you gave me 5 silver coins, and behold, I have gained another 5 silver coins. Now I want to take a very close look at the key words in verse 21, the next verse. It begins with Amar. What? It's not written in Hebrew? I know. But the Greek word Epheh is used in place of the Hebrew word Amar. And we've had that word. That's to say, to signification, is to bear forth, is to shed light on the subject. So, that's your first word. Then it says, Alto said to him, to who? Kurios, to his Lord, his Adon, that's the master. It's used of a possessor and owner. When it's used of a master of servants, of kings. You realize that when you become a Talmudim, when you agree to be a Talmudim, you've taken on a master. Literally, that person is your master in Bible times. That person was your master. He owned you. You were an indentured servant. And for your service, you eventually became ordained as a rabbi yourself. That's why people would do that. They didn't do it just because. There was something to be gained. Well, in America, we do this. We still do this. That's what the military is all about. I joined the military, and for that time that I gave them the opportunity to put me in places where they were going to shoot at me and drop bombs, try to kill me. I did all that for a certain amount of time, and then in return, they take care of me for the rest of my life if I need their help. That was part of the deal. So I got something from that. That's why, the fact that you may get killed is why the price that they pay for their veterans is so high. And it's done voluntarily. If I would have gotten a sunburn, and this, I'm not kidding you. If I would have gotten a sunburn and couldn't do my job, they could have court-martialed me, because that would have been me damaging government property. They were my master. It wasn't a bad thing. I got something out of it. If I hadn't have done it, I would have had that heart attack and died. I'm just saying. Anyway, because they took care of me. So it was literally a possessor, an owner of another person. Now, it doesn't mean they own you for the rest of your life. There's a set period before you start. Of course, when you were going to be a rabbi, that was different. The period of time wasn't set. The way you knew was when that rabbi decided you were ready, then you were ordained. But until he said you were ready, no, you didn't say you got 3 years. Because Yeshua was exceptional. Most rabbim never trained more than 1 or 2 rabbis in their entire lives. And that would take 10 to 15 years to do that. I mean, they went through a lot of them, but they would drop out. They'd get discouraged and drop out. So most rabbis never trained more than 1 in their whole life. And it's been that way from day one. But Yeshua was exceptional. He got 12 of them for sure. Well, yeah, 12 of them for sure, all the way to the other side. Not only that, there was 120 of them at the Shavuot thing. So Lord knows how many he really had. I mean, we know of the 12 that were particularly close to his heart, but there was an awful lot of others. I'm just saying. So he was exceptional in it. He did way more than one. And not only that, he did it in 3 years, and nobody did it in 3 years back then. Nobody. So anyway, but he literally owned them. You see why Shaul was so angry when the young man quit on him and then wanted to come back? Wow, this is a guy that breaks his covenants. That's not thought of very highly in the biblical world. Anyway, so he was your ruler. He was addressed with a name of honor and held a position of honor. And he was considered noble, and he was called father. He was. That's why Yeshua said, "Call no man father." Hello, he was their rabbi. They were supposed to call him father. I'm just saying. So it goes on, Altau, which is his, and this is ye, done. Properly the labor, to work about, to do, to manufacture. Remember that word? Yeah, it's the same thing. Then what do we have after that? Oh yeah, well done. Got to point that out. And then it's Dala, or Dale, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I don't care how you pronounce it. It's in place of the word Aved, servant. And then we have Agate, that's that word told, the good word, the physical good, the beautiful, the perfection, and all those things. And this is Kai, that's conjunction. This is peace, stay. That's used in place of the Hebrew word emunah. You guys know this word. Firmness, security, faithfulness. It's from the root aman. Properly, it is to prop, to stay, to sustain, to support. Specifically, to support with the arm, to carry a child. One who carries and cares for a child. Also one who guards and brings up, to sustain, to nourish. You see why you need the Torah? This is what it does to you. It takes you from childhood all the way up to parenthood. It's to found, to build up, hence an architect, a workman, to be stayed up, hence to be firm, unshaken, such as anyone may safely lean upon. Metaphorically, to be faithful is to be is to lean and confide on anyone to trust to be secure. So if you're having a trust issue with God, you're still not very faithful. I'm just saying. Faithfulness was generally only spoken with respect to Torah observance. Not always, but pretty much always. In other words, it's of being faithful to live out the Torah in your day-to-day life. That's what they call faithfulness. This word, used in this way, was no doubt chosen because the Yehudim, the Jews, believed that the Torah was the foundation of life. It sustains and supports those who live according to it. And this is epi in Greek, which is, of course, all in Hebrew. It's upon. It's on top of something. They have oliga in Greek. That's ma'at in Hebrew. Few. You were faithful in very little, and few. It's a scraping. It's a little, small. very little. You know, God isn't asking for much. All he really said was, take my yoke, my Torah upon you, and learn of me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. Yeshua, when he said this, called himself God. He called the Torah his yoke. This is, of course, a Hebrew way of saying I am God, as I said. In short, the yoke, which is the Torah, belongs to God. And so God is saying, or Yeshua is saying, I am God. There's no better place to learn of God, what he wants from us, what he wants for us, what he wants to do to us, than the Torah. If you want to know God, learn his Torah. And then the next word in Greek is ace, which is just a grammar thing, and it says pistos. That's that same word, emunah, faithfulness. So you've been faithful on little stuff, so he's then, of course, epi upon Rav. He's going to, or polon in Greek, but Rav in Hebrew. He's going to make him a ruler, as we're going to find out, over multius, whether of one continuous thing or of collectives which contain many parts, many individual things, many, numerous, much, great, vast, powerful, elder, great in age. A great man, which means he's either wealthy or he's a noble. He's a leader, a master, one who is skilled in any art, skillful. The Talmud calls Rav a doctor, an excellent teacher, it says, of the magnitude of his education. This is where we get the word rabbi, rabbi, Rav. That's the root. That's where we get it. We don't call him because it's great in size. We call it because they're great in education, not because they're a great person, but their education is great. They've gone beyond the bachelor's degree, beyond the master's degree. They've gone beyond all of that to the doctorate degree. So they call it rabbi. And so rabbi is what? It's the doctorate degree. It's followed by say, which in Greek means you. Then that's followed by katasteso, which is used in place of the Hebrew word rosh, rule. A head, to be the head or leader, to be over properly the head of men or animals, whatever is highest and supreme. A prince of the people, the chief city, the highest place, the head of a or summit of a mountain is called the rosh. The head on your shoulders is called the rosh, because it's when you're not doing this, the head is the highest. It's the head of the summit of a mountain, as I've said. It's of a column of an ear of corn. The headstone of the corner, most excellent spices, the sum or the amount, the total, properly the whole number, which also is the highest. It's to take the sum to number something. Metaphorically, the sum of words, also multitude or host, band, especially of soldiers, band of soldiers, in other words. What is first and foremost the beginning? Commencement, rosh, comes from this. It's the head. And everything commences from this place, the mind. So, Bereshit, that's rosh, that's your word in the beginning. So in the mind of God, remember, Vayomer, God thought it, because it came from the mind of sin, that God didn't actually have to physically say anything. Just saying. Then it says bo, which is enter. It's to come in, to enter a place. I'm going to skip all the stuff it says about that, because you know what it is to come to a place, to enter it. Ace, which is to, T-O. Taste, which is the. Then it's haran, which is used in place of simcha, joy. Enter into the joy, the gladness. It's to be joyful, especially joyful voices, joyful cries, joyful banquets. It's pleasures. It's from the root, which means to rejoice, to be glad. The primary idea appears to be that of joyful and cheerful countenance, your face being happy. To be clement, liberal, mild. It is used, its use is more widely extended, And it is even used for louder expressions of joy, as of those who make merry with wine, because they get loud, of rejoicing, properly designated merry voices, or have the force of leaping for joy. It is often applied to the heart, once to a light, because of fire leaping. In a bad sense, to rejoice at another's misfortune or destruction. Of course, this isn't being used that way. It's a good sense. Then we have tau, which is the Greek word for done. And they have kuriao, Lord. Enter into the joys of your Lord, your master, your possessor. So here's my amplified translation of living. Remember, we're Matthew 25:21 at this point. His Lord brought it to light and said to him, you have labored, worked about, made, produced by labor, manufactured, fabricated, prepared, made ready, obeyed, kept my commandments, did what was right, just, good, upright, kindness, happy, fair, and beautiful. You've well done. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like something God said to Yehu? I'm just saying. Yehu, that's funny. That's not his name. Anyway, I'm going to skip this. It don't make any sense anyway. Here's the regular translation, my translation of the Greek text, or 25:21 of Levi or Matthew. His Lord said to him, obedient and steadfast Eved, obedient and faithful servant. You have been observant. You have been steadfast. You have been faithful. Over little, I will make you ruler over much. Enter into the joy of your Adon, to the joy of your Lord. Okay, verse 22. He also came who received 2 coins, saying, Adon, boy, you feel pretty good about now, right? Because the last guy got so much, and you did essentially the same thing. Well, you actually did the same thing. You doubled the money you were given. So you're going to feel good about it. You're going to come up. And so he also came who received the 2 coins and said, Adon, you gave me 2 coins. Behold, I have gained another 2 coins. 2 silver coins, by the way. Then 23 says, and his Adon, his Lord said to him, obedient. He said, well done, obedient, is what he said. Well done, and steadfast Eved. You have been observant over little. I will make you ruler over much. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then came he that received 1 silver coin, saying, Adon, I know that you are a hard man. You're so scary. God's so mean. He throws the life. Anyway, reaping where you did not plant, and gathering together what you did not winnow. To those of you who don't know, winnowing is to throw wheat into the air. And what happens is the weeds and stuff that are in it, they get caught in the wind and blow away, but the wheat is heavier and falls back down. That's what winnowing is. And so a threshing floor is where you do it, because it comes back down on the floor. You don't want it to go in the dirt. So you have a threshing floor where you throw it up, the wheat comes down, and the chaff, the weeds, fly away. So it says you reap where you did not gather together what you did not winnow. And then 25, and I was afraid. He said, I was so afraid. So I went and hid the sword coin in the ground. Behold, what I have is yours. And his Adon, his Lord answered and said, wicked and lazy Eved. Wicked and lazy. Wicked and lazy servant. For you knew that I reap where I did not plant and gather where I did not winnow. You knew this. You knew who I am. You know who I am. You knew what kind of person I was. Therefore, you should have invested my silver coin with the banker, and I would have received interest on my silver when I returned. Don't forget. Verse 15 said, according to his own ability. That means that this wicked and lazy servant knew he could have taken the money to a bank and collected interest. He knew. But he chose not to. Verse 28. Therefore, said the Lord, he's talking. Therefore, take away the silver coin from him and give it to he who has 10 coins. For to everyone who has, it shall be given, and they shall have abundance. But those who do not have, it shall be taken from them. How do you take away something from someone who has nothing? I mean, isn't that an oxymoron? You take away what belongs to you, not what belongs to him. Isn't that exactly what just happened? The Lord gave the man something to be steward over. The man did nothing. So what he was given was taken. We are given salvation, and in return, something is expected from us. Now, I realize this goes against Christian doctrine, which states that salvation is a free gift. But listen to the words of the King of every universe, seen and unseen. Listen to the words of Yeshua. Listen, Christians, to the word of Jesus. If this parable sounds like a contradiction to us, then something is wrong with our theology, not his. Just because a gift is free doesn't mean that there are no strings attached. If you were given a car, someone gives you a car, it doesn't mean that you will never have to fill it with gas, change the oil, wash it, insure it, and drive it responsibly. You still have to do all that, don't you? There are strings attached. In fact, if you get caught delivering drugs in that new free car, it will be taken from you. You can be assured of that. Verse 30, and the Lord goes on saying, their Lord, not the Lord, but their Lord. And cast this worthless, it said, and then cast this worthless servant into the outermost darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Two of the servants doubled the master's money. The master ended the verse by saying, enter into the joy of the Lord. What joy? This guy sounds pretty harsh to me. Maybe it's the joy of not being tossed into the outer darkness. The wicked and lazy servant knew his master would require something from him, but he did nothing. He rendered to his master that which already belonged to him, and nothing more. How many of you have ever heard someone say, just tell me what's the least I have to do? He did the bare minimum and nothing else. He said the sinner's prayer and nothing more. He let himself believe that his master would be pleased with the fact that he did nothing, all the while knowing who his master really was. I think that's commentary. I think Yeshua is telling us that we all knew better. Weeping and gnashing of teeth is a Hebrew idiom, by the way. It means that he will have to live with the regret of his actions. This saying was meant to portray unimaginable regret. It's hard to imagine living with that kind of regret 24/7 for the rest of eternity, just because someone is too lazy, too wicked to do simple tasks that God has given them. What is the joy of the Lord? We need to probably know that now, right? Because half of us are terrified. Well, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2 says, looking to Yeshua, that's Jesus to the Christians, looking to Yeshua, the origin, they say author, the origin and completer of our Torah observance, because that's what righteousness is. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and is the power that sits on the throne of God. Set down on the right hand of the throne is idiomatic, speaking of the power. And in this case, it is the power of God to reconcile his covenant with his people via the cross. So the joy of the Lord is an intimate relationship with him, and he paid an incredible price to get this. There is only one way to enter into this relationship. We can find it in Exodus chapter 20, verse 6. It says, in composing mercy to the thousands of them that love me and keep my mitzvot. That's the commandments. That's, by the way, that's the 613 laws. He didn't say those who love me and keep my devarim. He said my mitzvot. The devarim are the 10 commandments, as they're called. That's 10 categories is what they should have been called. The mitzvot, that's the 613 laws. That's the Jewish law. That's the Torah. That's what he's talking about. God said, in composing mercy, you want mercy? Composing mercy to the thousands of them that love me and keep my mitzvot. you don't keep his mitzvot, you don't love him. And you know what? It says that in the book of James to you Christians. It's there. Let's look it up. It's a short one. Deuteronomy 5:29 says, "Oh, that they set their hearts to reverence me and keep my mitzvot." Reverence of God is keeping his 613 laws all their days, not just 1 week out of your life or one time in your life, but all their days, God said, that they and their children be well done forever. There it is, obedient. If you keep the laws of God, you will be well done. Deuteronomy 5:29. Not knowing the Hebrew idiom threw off the English translators. They thought that things would go well for those who keep the mitzvot, the 613 laws. But Moshe was simply restating that God's children and their children, every generation to come, their children, that's what that means. Every generation to come are to keep the mitzvot. They're to keep all of God's laws, the Torah. Keeping the mitzvot, the commandments, the 613 laws, in no way assures us that things will go well for us here on earth. But keeping them because of our love and reverence for God will go well. It will go well for us when we stand before him and give account of what we did and or did not do with the task he gave us. Because the laws are the task he gave us. In John 14:15 of the Sephrim Shohim, the New Testament, Yeshua, this is the guy they call Jesus, said, "If you love me, obey my mitzvot." Yeshua has once again declared that he is the physical manifestation of Yahweh God, because he called the law his. This is a remez, a hinting back to the following verses: Exodus 26, Leviticus 22:31, Leviticus 26:3, Deuteronomy 5:10, Deuteronomy 5:29, 1 Kings 3:14, 1 Kings 6:12, 1 Kings 11:38, 2 Kings 17:13. What are those tasks which are within our ability to accomplish? Keep his mitzvot. Live according to the law of God, which is also called the Torah. The Torah is the place where God's mitzvot, his commandments, are written down. Yeshua is Emmanuel. Emmanuel? Emmanuel is how you actually say it. He is Emmanuel. He is God with us. He is not Bar Emmanuel, the Son of God with us. The Bible calls him Emmanuel, God with us. Yeshua didn't have a different set of laws. He didn't have a different set of mitzvot. He didn't have a different Torah. Yeshua's commandments are God's commandments because Yeshua is God. He was God in the flesh, born as a child. He was not God who came and impregnated some other man's wife and was born illegitimately. Do you follow what I'm saying here? God came. There was no physical contact. He was not the product of God and Mary. It was God himself being born as the Son. Emmanuel, God with us. Not Bar Emmanuel, the Son of God with us. So if Yeshua said, my commandments, then he's calling himself God, and he's saying that the 613 laws are his. So what is it going to be, I should say? Are you still satisfied with the bare minimum that it takes to achieve salvation like a wicked and lazy servant? Or will you double what has been given to you? Will you do that which you know you are supposed to do? It's truly your choice. Wicked and lazy, or righteous and faithful. This would be a great day for you to choose whom you will serve. A great day to choose life and not death. This would be a great day for you to do well for the rest of your life. Shalom. Shalom.